Resident Evil Revelations 2 is very special to me. Not only is it my favorite recent Resident Evil game that I have played through many times on 3 separate platforms, 4 if you count the PlayStation TV and PlayStation Vita as 2, but it's also the greatest success on my YouTube channel. My PlayStation Vita Revelations 2 review is currently sitting at over 62,000 views. So let's see if we can get another Revelations 2 review to do well on the YouTube channel. Here is my review of the Nintendo Switch version of Resident Evil Revelations 2. Revelations 2 takes place between the events of Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. Claire Redfield is now a member of a new anti-bioterrorist group known as TerraSave, and while she's attending a party to welcome newcomer Moira Burton, the daughter of Barry Burton, the entire group is attacked and kidnapped. Now, the first interesting thing about this story is that it is told through 2 different perspectives. The first half of each chapter, you see Claire and Moira trying to escape the island that TerraSave was taken to. In the second half, we see Barry Burton going through those same areas 6 months later trying to find them. Now, the other interesting part of Revelations 2 is that the reason behind all of the virus experiments, the kidnappings, and everything else is very different and very unlike what Resident Evil villain plot points are normally like. Revelations 2, like pretty much all recent Resident Evil games aside from Resident Evil 7, is a third-person horror-based shooting game. You're going to be navigating environments, taking down enemies with firearms and melee weapons. Now, before we go on to the actual game, a lot of handheld gamers are probably asking, what's the difference between Revelations 2 on the PlayStation Vita and Revelations 2 on the Nintendo Switch? The main exclusive additions are motion controls for aiming and reloading, and there's a new minigame for raid mode that is like a Resident Evil themed Ghosts and Goblins game. Now, other than that, it's like the base console package where you get the base game and all of the DLC. Now, the progress in Revelations 2 is very similar to Revelations, but with a gameplay style closer to Resident Evil 6 and a very heavy emphasis on cooperative play. Not only can you do local split-screen co-op through the story campaign, you've got a lot of puzzles and a lot of story sections that require you to constantly switch back and forth between the 2 playable characters, making them work together to progress through the game. And the cooperative play focus goes further into combat itself. Every supporting character has some way to assist the main character in each chapter. Moira can stun enemies with her flashlight, allowing Claire to perform follow-up attacks, and Natalia can see invisible enemies, allowing Barry to aim and shoot at them. Now, with all this focus on cooperative play, there's only one real thing about the base game that I do not like. You can do co-op for the story campaign, but it's local only. There is no online co-op like there was in Resident Evil 6. This is the same across all console versions. PlayStation Vita, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, the list goes on. It's just like a huge missed opportunity. Why would you create this game with such a massive focus on co-op and not make online co-op? Now, the combat in the game is pretty much the same as it always was. You can pick up ammo and weapons as you go, and each character has their own ammo and weapon types, like Claire with firearms and Moira with her flashlight and crowbar. What's different about Revelations 2 is character development and growth in the gameplay mechanics. You have a huge skill tree through campaign mode, and all of the BP you earn in raid mode, the minigame, the story campaigns, and the story DLC can be used to enhance all of your abilities. Now, these skill enhancements could be as simple as decreasing the time it takes to use a green herb to heal, or it could be as advanced as allowing the AI to use firearms and not use your ammo in the process. And the same can be said of raid mode. All the characters level up independently, and they all have so many different unlockable skills that they can equip and upgrade. Just like the skill tree in campaign mode. You've got skills around green herbs, you've got skills around melee weapons, you've got skills around specific other types of weapons, you've got different combat styles that you can unlock. There's just really a lot of content here. And speaking of content, let's talk about how long this game may last. Your first run through the campaign mode, unless you accidentally do all of the shortcuts in the story, should take you around 9 to 10 hours. But the big thing adding on content is raid mode. Unlike raid mode in Revelations 1, Revelations 2's raid mode has 45 different stages. That's over twice the amount of stages, plus you've got entirely different gauntlets for those stages that will unlock separate difficulties. We're talking at least 20 hours of content, and that's assuming you don't replay the story for the other unlocks and you don't have to repeat any raid mode stages. Now, let's talk about controls. You know where I'm going with this. Just like with Resident Evil Revelations on the Nintendo Switch, the motion controls are great, but they are exclusive to the Joy-Cons. You cannot use gyro aiming on the Pro Controller. Now let's talk about presentation. Just like Revelations 2 on the Nintendo Switch looks really, really good. There's a ton of detail, especially when you compare it to the PlayStation Vita version of the game. Everything is detailed. There are virtually no jagged edges anywhere. It just looks like a completely new game for handheld gamers. Now, load times, on the other hand, are a problem. If you recall, the PlayStation Vita version had really long load times, like longer than a minute to load your save. And the Nintendo Switch shares those load times. The initial load up for the game is nice and quick, but every loading sequence afterwards is very, very long. When you're loading a save, expect to wait at least a minute, maybe more. Now let's go into battery life. As a note, Revelations 2 is locked to 30 frames per second, unlike Revelations, which was locked to 60 frames per second, and that does have a slight difference in the battery life. So, here are my battery times from 100% to 0%. With maximum brightness and the Wi-Fi on, 2 hours and 26 minutes. Maximum brightness with the Wi-Fi off, 2 hours and 31 minutes. Lower brightness with the Wi-Fi on, 3 hours and 4 minutes. Lower brightness with the Wi-Fi off, 3 hours and 11 minutes. Note that unlike Revelations, I actually had the brightness all the way down to 0 when I was doing these tests. And you can see a clear 10-minute difference. In conclusion, Revelations 2 on the Switch is really everything the PlayStation Vita port should have been and then some. While the game isn't perfect, with long loading sequences and motion controls being excluded from the Pro Controller, it's a horror-based shooting game with tons of content and, in my opinion, one of the more unique plot lines of the Resident Evil series. Reviews to Go rates Resident Evil Revelations 2 for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below or head to the website at www.reviewstogo.com.